If I add taxes, you straight away, this 9 lakh expense for a 40-year-old guy for a 4 crore corpus with all standard deviations as zero, your 83 0% has become 73 years just by adding taxes. Hey guys, welcome to the Personal Finance. And today, as promised, we are explaining our web calculator, the basic version that we have built of our Excels. For anybody who needs a detailed goal planning models, still we only have Excels. But this web calculator gives you a basic explanation of how much corpus will you need for retirement. Just to repeat for most of you, this is a retirement only calculator. Okay. What that means is that we are checking for a corpus only for retirement recurring expenses. This is not for a one-time goal like vacation, not for a one-time goal like you want to have a car, or for kids' education or marriage. This is not for that. This is only for a typical retirement recurring expenses, which generally in my view are lesser, right? Because people tend to add lots of expenses. In my experience with so many conversations I had with my subscribers on retirement, many of them start to add a lot of things like school fees, also annual expenses. They are not recurring expenses. Keep those away, please, for heaven's sake. Just add a recurring expense and add a buffer on it for medical expenses in the future, right? So this calculator is for that. So without delaying further, let us get into the calculator of how you can use this calculator, the link of which you can see it, and also it's given in description and the title. Okay, you can click it, you can use it, you can check how this calculator works, and I'm going to explain this to you right now as we go about it, right? So okay, so here is you have to put your present age here. The annual expense that you have right now, recurring annual expense, not including all those fancy things that you add, right? Recurring expenses. Initial corpus that you want to check whether how long it will suffice. Again, as I mentioned, it is to check it's to compute the expense. It's to compute that whether the corpus will be sufficient or not, right? And for how long it will be sufficient, right? Then this is the input equity proportion. That means out of 5 crore rupees, as an example, 50% of it will be into equity and the rest 50 will be debt, right? And then is number of simulations in terms of Monte Carlo. This is the first set of inputs that you need to give. Next is, it will also give you the real rate of return as a result. That means for this particular case, the real rate of return, that means if you are getting 1% RRR, it will of course surpass above 100 years for this person who is age 40. And if it's 0%, it will be 94 years, and if it's minus 2%, it is 76 years, right? And then once we simulate, we'll be having all this corpus for all these Monte Carlo parameters here, okay? This side of this. Next is, of course, for the people who do not believe that taxes impact their withdrawals, I have made a small thing here that you can go ahead and put fixed asset tax whatever you want, and also I have put 0% fixed asset tax, and also in here I have put in 0% long-term taxes, of course, which is not the case, but then I have put in 0% long-term taxes in case you want to go ahead and check. Next is about the Monte Carlo inputs in terms of how this will be simulated. That's basically inflation. Three things are simulated here in Monte Carlo. One is inflation, equity returns, and debt returns. Okay, so inflation, we are having a mean of about 7% inflation. Equity returns, I am taking 10% here, and debt is 6. You can modify it the way you want. Okay, you can modify it the way you want here, and of course if you don't want that, you can just put a text also here, and all of these things are modifiable, right? So This is the basic calculator, and let us have, and also each of these, there are ideal values given. For example, ideal value for inflation I have considered to be between 6 to 8%, because we are considering also a standard deviation. That means the inflation will keep varying. I'll show you this eventually, just give me a minute, right? And then each of this has standard deviation between 12 to 18 based on standard deviation. For example, if you're taking a standard deviation of 18, you can take obviously the ideal return to be a little higher, right? In terms of, let's say you can take 12.5 as higher. Each of these variables, inflation, returns, equity, debt, are capped. I mean, because when you go for Monte Carlo simulations, you see that the equity returns sometimes give even 40%, 30%, right? I did not want, because we are doing a conservative calculator as usual. For the people who are new, we are a little conservative in terms of our planning, because this is all assuming that you will be not having any passive income, no passive income, no rent, no bhada coming from anyone. You are not going to go consulting anywhere. No, it's just that this is the corpus, and that's what you're living off the corpus of your recurring expenses, right? That's what the idea is. Now, just for the sake of doing this thing, I'm just putting inflation as 1% standard deviation with a 7% mean. Let's say 1.2% standard deviation mean, and rest all things are similar, right? So if I just take, let's say, if I just take one simulation cycle only, right? I get a example cash flow statement here, and that's what I want to show you here. With a just 1% inflation, 1.2% standard deviation, and 7% inflation, look at this inflation column, that what all we see in terms of inflation. See, 6.4%, 8.1, 7.9, 5.9. So this is a Monte Carlo here. If I just change this 1.2% to say 2% standard deviation, 2.2% standard deviation, right? Look at the way inflation is changing, right? 9.3%, 8.5%. Right, even to the matter that 9 point, look at this, right? It's going beyond 7% for sure, right? It's not fixed, right? So, and if I take it even higher, right, you can see 13.4%, 19.3%, hyperinflation, right? But then I would recommend that the ideal thing should be between 2 and 3. And this is 2 and 3 is far better than, taking a fixed inflation of 7%. Now, this is an example cash flow statement. For example, if you see, my standard deviation of equity returns is 0 here. And that's why if you see, my equity returns is always 10.3, 10.3, 10.3. This is what 10.3 here is. But then if I just take my equity returns as, say, with a standard deviation of, say, 14, right? And I run the simulation, you can see equity returns, right? 2.4 minus 7.6 minus 1, 12.5, 6.9, 12.5, 12.5, 4.9, minus 4. See, this is what it is, right? Equity returns, when you add a standard deviation, obviously that is what simulates the market returns. Okay, this is exactly what simulates the market returns, and this is exactly what we want, right? And this is what is now this is debt returns, which 6% I have taken, ideally between 5 to 7, and again debt returns based on equity returns and your standard deviation here. You can put a standard deviation here as 2.2, because once I see, it was always 6 before, because I had put it 0. Now if I do it like this, it comes 5%, 8.4, 6.9, 3.6, 6.5. All of these are capped. Now these are equity returns. Now in my study, what I have done and discussing with a few other financial planners, the ideal values of these things are mentioned, and you can pick one, right? Again, I'm giving you a calculator. I'm not giving you an advice, right? This is just a calculator. I am not giving you any advice that what it should be and where you should invest to get these values, right? It is just a nominal range that I'm giving, that you can put and get your thing. Again, this cash flow statement is a one example that I have shown. In Monte Carlo, you have to run for 500 cycles, right? So before we run Monte Carlo, since you know the calculator very well now, before we run Monte Carlo, let me show you this thing, right? If I take standard deviation 0, if I take equity returns standard deviation 0, if I take debt return standard deviation 0, and I use 7, 10, 6, and I use a 0% tax on fixed and long term, and if I run this simulation, right, obviously what you will get is a 0% RRR 92 for any and every simulation, right? आपको हर जगह वही number मिलेगा. That if I am spending 9 lakhs annually, right, and I have a corpus of 4 lakhs as an example, and if I run this simulation, right, what I get is 83 years as an example, and this 83 years is similar to the 0% RRR because I have taken 0% tax. Now, with the same, if I take a 15% tax and a long-term tax as per strategy of 12.5% and I run the simulation, that 83 years becomes 73 years. If I add taxes, you straight away, this 9 lakh expense for a 40-year-old guy for a 4 crore corpus with all standard deviations as 0, that means it's only going to run one cycle because standard deviation is 0, so there's no simulation happening. Your 83, 0% has become 73 years just by adding taxes. Almost a reduction of 13-14% in terms of age. I hope you understand what I'm saying. That's the impact of taxes, my friends. And if I make taxes as 20%, this 73 years will become 71 years. I hope you're getting the gravity of situation for the ones who keep claiming that taxes doesn't matter. And somehow you will get away with a 5%, 6% assumption in taxes. That's not how things work. Okay. Now let's go ahead and try one simulation only. So again, as I mentioned, if you put all standard deviations as 0, you will get because these are not changing, the means are not changing. You will get one example of the cash flow statement. Basically, you are withdrawing. You are withdrawing what? You're withdrawing if your expense is if your total expense is in a year 9 lakh rupees, right? You are withdrawing 11.5 lakh rupees from your first year, right? And then you can calculate SWR from there on. So 9 lakh rupees अगर आपको चाहिए साल के, तो आपको 11.5 lakhs you have to withdraw from your portfolio. And what do you withdraw? You withdraw 5.5 lakh rupees from equity and you withdraw 6 lakhs from your debt based on the assumption of 50-50. Of course, you can change all this. Now let's run Monte Carlo and see what happens. So for similar cases, I'm just reading Monte Carlo. I'm putting inflation as say 2%, 1.8, and I'm taking inflation here as say 15%, and here I'm taking inflation as say 2.5%. Okay, or let's say we're taking inflation as 2% in debt, right? Now I'm running 500 simulations, 500 cycles, right? So you will not be seeing example of cash flow statement because it doesn't matter. 500, I cannot show you all 500 years cash flow statement, right? It's simulating. So let me run it and let us see the 0% RRR is 83. क्या होता है यहाँ पे for 80% confidence level. So I'm running it, right? This will take some time to run. So maybe about 10 seconds or 20 seconds it might take based on your computer speed. So you will have to wait for some time for it to finish. And by then probably what you can do is you can just keep writing what do you get in terms of analysis. Now, yeah, so we are done, and you can see here that we have for 80% confidence, we get 64 years. That means for a 9 lakh expense, 4 crore corpus for a 40 years old with a 50-50 initial assumption and all the assumption of Monte Carlo given below with a 20% fixed assumption tax and long-term tax as per strategy of 12.5%. We can read here. The corpus will only last till 64 years. Our 0% says 83 years. Again, you can change all of these parameters and you will have a better results. For example, if you can make standard, if you can control inflation and you can say, okay, fine, you know what? I will control my inflation. My inflation is not going to move beyond this, else I will control my expenses. If you do all those things, that's a different story altogether. You can increase your assumption of equity to 12%, 12.5%. Obviously, this number will come down, right? So I just wanted you to have a look at this calculator. Put in your numbers, right? And you can figure out. Again, somebody might say, if I just have an exposure of 100% in debt, I get 75. What is this use of this calculator? This calculator only tests the sensitivity of the equity in your portfolio, right? Equity as a tool, you know that it's the only tool which can beat inflation, right? So it just measures the sensitivity of equity. That's all it is, right? So if for 80% Monte Carlo, you are getting anything above 80 years in this calculator, right? With whatever corpus and expense and all the parameters, I think you should be good enough to proceed with retirement in my view. Once you get about 78, 80 years in a 80% confidence range, right? Assume, in my view, assume a 15% fixed tax, because you will be getting you will be putting investments in FD, which gets taxed on a salary slab and things like that, because those things will keep on changing, because government is likely to change also the tax slabs for these things shortly, right, in the coming budget. So all those benefits you will be getting. So I think if you get anything about 80 years in 80% confidence, you should go ahead with that corpus, and I don't think you need to look back again at any calculators. You have to just follow a strategy of whatever you're following with the help of your financial advisor, and you should be good for your retirement, right? So that's about it, guys, and thank you so much for having a look. If you like this calculator, please do share to everybody else. Again, as I mentioned before, I am not giving you any kind of advice, right, in terms of investments, which mutual fund, which horse, which race course. No, I'm not giving any of those things. I'm just giving you that go ahead, use the calculator, find out whether the corpus is sufficient or not. Do not ask 100 people here and there. Just use the calculator. You will know whether corpus is sufficient or not, at what range, inflation, equity returns, debt. Each of these you can modify by your own. Ideal values I have given you. Those are ideal because of the fact that when you're getting into retirement, you cannot take too much of risk, right? That's why those values is what I have mentioned. So go ahead, share the calculator. Let me know the feedback on calculator. I'm pretty quick. If there are any bugs, I'm going to fix it quickly in probably 3 or 4 hours and give it to you on the same website, right? It's a GitHub thing, and eventually I'll be releasing the code as well, so that you can community can build this entire calculator. So thank you so much. If you like it, please like the video and share the calculator, and thank you so much, and happy financial planning.